Today we'll be trying something new, where you'll be able to write a piece along with me. I'll be breaking down the music as I write it step by step as much as I can, and then you can take those ideas and incorporate them into your own piece. As always, I like to start with a reason behind the piece, a story. And I'm calling this piece Lydia's Music Box. The idea is that an older woman is in her house and she's struggling to get to a shelf. She's using a walker, and as she gets to the shelf, she opens a music box. And that music box begins to play a tune. That tune transports her in her memory back to when she was a child and she first had that music box in her room, and she would open it and the tune would play and she would dance around her room. So we're really looking at this piece from her perspective, her feelings, her memories, what it means to her to hear this piece of music. Okay, let's start composing. We'll be writing this piece so that it can be played on a piano, and when I think about a music box, for some reason I think about the style of a waltz, and I think that works perfectly with this piece. A waltz is a dance form and it works with our dancing idea for the piece. So let's go ahead and put in a meter of a waltz, and our time signature would be 3/4 for that. That's the typical meter of a waltz. And let's add in the tempo marking of dotted half note equals 56. The reason I use dotted half note equals instead of quarter note equals, and I guess that would be the same as quarter note equals 168, is because as a conductor, I would conduct this in one. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, like that. I wouldn't conduct it 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So that just gives a little bit more information that it's to be felt in one. So let's put our tempo marking as dotted half note equals 56. And let's add in 15 more bars so that we have 16 bars to start working on our first A section. We'll write this piece in the key of C major. So here's our C major scale. And here's a list of the triads from C major, the chords that we'll be using. And let's also allow us to borrow chords from the parallel minor, the C minor or C Aeolian natural minor scale. So here's a list of those chords. And also one other thing I'd like to do with this is, you'll notice I've named it Lydia's Music Box. So I think we can inject some of the Lydian sound into this piece. It's a very pretty mode. And the only difference between C major and Lydian is that raised fourth degree. So that fourth degree, the F, will be raised to an F sharp. So we're not going to write a modal piece. We're not writing a Lydian modal piece. We're just going to inject that Lydian sound, that raised fourth sound where we can. This might be a good time to take a screenshot of our palette of sounds so that you can reference them as you're writing. Before we start writing down any notes, let's really feel that waltz meter, that 3/4 meter in our bodies, and imagine the story of a young girl in her room dancing to the tune of this music box. So I'm going to go ahead and play the click just so you can feel the tempo. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Really internalize that feeling. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now let's add a very typical waltz piano accompaniment in the left hand. We'll start with 2 measures of our 1 chord, the C major chord, and it would often be something like this. We've all heard this before, but I feel like this is much too heavy for our idea of the music box. So I'm just going to modify this a little bit, and I'm going to take that root note of our C chord up an octave, and then I'm just going to play the 3rd and the 5th on beats 2 and 3. That's much lighter, and I really feel like that works with our music box idea. I'm also going to change this bass clef in the left hand to a treble clef because I'm pretty certain we're going to be writing this in this higher octave. I'll add the dynamic marking of mezzo piano, which means medium soft, And then finally, in the tempo marking, I'm going to add the word waltz, just so there's no question how this piece is to be performed. Now that we have a strong idea of what our left-hand accompaniment is going to sound like for this waltz, let's come up with a melody. We've laid out the A section to be 16 bars, so let's break that down into 4-bar phrases. And I think further break that down and just come up with a rhythm for our melody, a 4-bar rhythm. Rhythm's an incredibly important component of a melody, especially with something that's a dance where we're meant to feel this movement. So I'm going to go ahead and just play a click and then try to clap out some rhythms, trying to feel that movement of our dancer. That would work. That would be nice. So, just by clapping that, I'm starting to get a feel for what kind of rhythm I want. So go ahead and spend some time with this click at this tempo and clapping out some rhythms and trying to feel the movement of the dancer. Once you've come up with a rhythm for your first 4-bar phrase, go ahead and enter that into the right hand of your piano part. And I'll just use the note C, the tonic note, for my rhythm. I'm not concerned with what the melody is right now. I just want the rhythm. So my rhythm is a dotted quarter note, followed by 3/8 notes, followed by a half note, followed by a quarter note, followed by another half note, followed by a quarter note, and then followed finally by a dotted half note. So that's my rhythm. Let's take a listen to that rhythm. Using the palette of sounds that we've already decided on, I'm going to begin assigning melodic notes to this rhythm. A good choice for the first beat here would be a chord tone from our 1 chord, the C major chord. So that means either a C, an E, or a G. My only concern being not to dip down into the range of the accompaniment. Any of those notes from the C major triad would work for the first note. I'm going to pick a G for my first note. Looking at the accompaniment figure, as of now, I also have a C major chord in the second measure of this piece. And I think I may leave that because this will give me a good chance to inject that Lydian sound that we talked about. So I'm going to put an F sharp on this half note on beat 1 of measure 2. Now I'll back up to these 8th notes in measure 1 and look to connect the G on the downbeat of measure 1 with the F sharp on the downbeat of measure 2. The note I'll pick for the melody here from our C major scale is going to be a D. I'm going to jump down a 4th to a D. Now the only note in that C major scale to avoid on this 1 chord would be the F natural, because between the 3rd of our C major chord, the E, and this F natural, you could get this kind of interval, a flat 9. And that's fairly dissonant. Now you can use that F natural on the 1 chord in some sort of non-stressed way, so as a passing tone or say an upper neighbor tone. You just don't want to sit on it on a stressed beat. For the next 2/8 notes, I'll again use chord tones. I'm going to use the 3rd of our C major chord, the E, and then I'll use the 5th of our C major chord, the G, and that G will lead very nicely by half step back down to the F sharp. Let's take a listen to this. That works, and it's got a very nice delicate feel to it. Let's see if we can get anything more out of this. I'm going to try something else. I think I'll go to another chord tone here. That's what I'm hearing. So I'm going to play the E on this 8th note. And then I'm going to do the leap of a 5th up to a B natural, which would be the major 7th of that C major chord. A very pretty sound. And then because I've made that wide leap up of a 5th, I'm going to come back down with an A, which would be the 6th or the 13th of the C major sound. And that should lead nicely to the F sharp. That's a pretty melody. Let's listen to that. I think this is the one. I like this. It maintains that delicate feel. It's really pretty, and it's got a little bit of a magical feel to it, too. All right, to finish this phrase off, I think what I'll do is just sing along with what I already have and see where my voice naturally goes. I'll use the rhythms that we have here. Let's just give that a try. Da, da, dee, da, 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 dee, da, da. That felt very natural, and I find if it feels natural in my voice, then that's a good indication that it's going to work. Okay, let me add those notes in. Now we'll harmonize this new portion of our melody using chords from our C major chord palette. Let's look at the function of each of these chords and which ones might be the best to choose here. The chords in the tonic area, you can think of those as your home base. The one chord that we've used here to start the piece is really our home base. The 3 minor chord can be used as an extension of that one chord to change its color. The 6 minor chord is often used in a deceptive cadence, so these chords all represent home. The chords in the subdominant region are those we use to start our journey and move away from the tonic. The 2 minor chord and the 4 major chord can often be substituted for one another. They contain 2 of the same notes, the F and the A, though they do have a different sound. The D minor chord can feel a little bit darker for lack of a deeper explanation, and the F major chord can feel a little bit brighter. The chords in the dominant area are much more unstable because of the tritones and leading tones that they contain. There's a gravity that wants to pull us back to the tonic section once we've hit one of those dominant chords. So in the style of music we're writing, once we use a chord from the dominant section, that will lead us to follow it with a chord from the tonic section. Now with that in mind, let's go back to measure 3 and pick a chord for our melody. We've got an A in the melody, and we've just come from the 1 chord in the tonic section. So let's travel to the subdominant area and pick a chord from there. The A in the melody is a chord tone in both the 2 minor chord, the D minor chord, and the 4 major chord, the F major chord. So either one of those would work, and as we said, they're often able to be substituted for one another. I'm going to pick the 2 minor chord, the D minor chord, because it has a little bit more of the sound I'm after. On the G in the last beat of this measure, I could continue with our subdominant D minor sound, but I also could put the dominant sound, the G major chord here, which would lead us back into the tonic section to end the phrase. And now that we've used this 5 chord, the G major chord from the dominant section, we're going to want to return to the tonic section on this next measure on the E. But instead of returning to the 1 chord from the tonic region, which would be considered an authentic cadence going from the dominant region 5 chord to the 1 chord of the tonic region, I'm going to choose the 6 minor chord because I think that gives it a little bit more sense of melancholy, which really works for the piece. So that 5 to 6 minor cadence would be called a deceptive cadence. Let's take a listen to what we have so far. Even in just these first 4 measures, I'm feeling this from the perspective of the older woman looking back at herself being young and being able to freely dance around her room. I think the Lydian sound, the delicacy of our arrangement, and the deceptive cadence to the minor chord, it really all works together. And it's kind of transcended the waltz form. It's not just a dance, but there's a lot of emotion to this piece. So I think we're on the right track. Let's continue on and see what we'll do for the next 4 bars. I'll start by listing the chords for the accompaniment up above the staff, just so that we have them moving forward. Taking a look at the next measure, measure 5, let's pick a chord this time from our parallel minor palette, the C natural minor palette of chords. Like we started in the beginning, we started with 2 measures of a chord, and we used C major. So I think I'll pick a major chord here from our palette, which means we have an E flat major chord, an A flat major chord, and a B flat major chord to choose from. Any of those 3 chords should work, though the A flat chord and the B flat chord are closer to where I've come from. So I'll pick one of those, and we'll start by trying the B flat major chord. I'll add it into the left hand accompaniment using the same pattern we've used so far. I'll add the B flat major chord symbol up above, and then we'll copy the rhythm in the first 4 bars and paste it in starting on bar 5. I'll turn all these notes into just the tonic, into C, because we don't want to get confused. I'm only after the rhythm here. And now, like we did in the first 4 measures, we'll assign a melody to our rhythm. I wanted to use a major chord here because I want to mirror what we did in the first 2 bars. We had a C major chord, and we had this Lydian sound on it, this raised fourth, this very pretty sound. So I wanted to have a major chord again and do that same thing, interject that Lydian sound. So on this B flat chord that we have now, the Lydian sound would be the E natural. And we're ending this A minor chord on an E. So I say we just start right with the E. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll start with the E, and I'm going to just lock this so I'm using all the same rhythms. So we'll start with the E, and then I'm going to look at the shape of the line that I have here and just kind of mirror that. So it could go E, could go down to a C, go down the 3rd, and then jump up to, I like that major 7th, so I want to jump up to the major 7th, which would be the A of the B flat chord, and then come back down. And then we'd go to, I guess, to the D. No, that's not quite right. I think what I'm going to do is go here and change this to a D, and then we'll jump all the way down to a C here. Let me lock that again. There's our new melody using the rhythm. Let's just listen to all of that. All right, that worked well. Let's look at what we're going to do for these last 2 chords here. It sounds like we're cadencing back to 1, which makes a lot of sense since we're ending this phrase. So for the E, the most obvious choice would be to go to the C chord. For the D, we could go to the 5, and then back to the 1. We could stay on the 1 chord and just do. That works too. You could take this D and make this a D sharp. And we could play a G7 with a sharp 5. That might be really interesting. And then go to this sharp 5 sound. I like it. It's kind of corny in a good way. It's got a nostalgic feel to it. I think I'm going to try that. Let's try that. So I'll put that in here. And I'll just use that same voicing I just used a second ago. And then back to the C. And then just to spell this correctly, Let's make this E flat a D sharp. Okay, let's listen to how that sounds. And I'll put our new chords up above. I think what we have so far is coming out really well. It's got all the emotions that I was hoping for, and actually even a little bit more with this nostalgic feel of this G7 sharp 5. And that happens sometimes where you discover something about your own piece as you're writing it. That's part of the fun of it. This session took a little bit longer than I thought it would, so I say we call it here. And my hope is that you'll take what we've done step by step and write your own piece and follow along and compose with me. Next time we'll come back and we'll finish this piece off. Until then, go out, compose, have fun, don't stress about it. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Just get out there and write some notes down. All right, I'll see you next time.